final speaker this morning is Judy Anderson. Judy's an inventiologist, love the title, at Inventium. She's represented RMIT at the annual Collegiate Entrepreneurship Organisation Conference in Chicago. She's worked as a senior innovation consultant for Deloitte. She loves innovation and breaking down silos, fostering innovation. Please welcome Judy Anderson.
So it's awesome. Thank you for having me in the Hunter region. It's really nice to be here for something other than red wine. So it's really nice to be here for a breakfast event, which is great. And as Christine introduced me, I'm from Inventium. So we work all around the world with clients, helping them innovate more effectively. And something that I see a lot of in my line of work, unfortunately, is just a lot of bad innovation. So just ideas that should never have seen the light of day, because there are such things as bad ideas, and there's quite a few of them out there, like this one, picnic pants. Anyone seen these before? Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who like to eat food out of your crutch, highly recommend. And this one, appropriate for the Hunter Valley, the wine lanyard. So if you like a bit of red wine on your collar, it's a good one. And finally, my personal favourite. Anyone in the room have one of these? Anyone willing to admit that they have one of these? No? Yeah, so as we can see, there are definitely things such as bad innovation. So just ideas that should never have seen the light of day, let alone the screen up here. So I want to talk to you about why you should care, and just to make sure that none of you in this room are ever responsible for an innovation such as the ones we just saw. But why should we innovate? We've heard a lot of fantastic stories as to the benefits of innovation and what can come out as an output, but for us at Inventium, it really just boils down to two things. And the first thing is to grow. So whether that be in size or in impact, it doesn't matter. And the second thing is not quite as inspiring, but to not die. And the world is rife with examples of organisations that have failed to innovate, and as a result, they're dead, or like this guy here, they really just don't know it yet. So very important that we're actually innovating. And I just want to, this is one of my personal favourite quotes around innovation. I just want to give you a moment to read it. Yeah, so that's from, of course, the ex-chairman and CEO of GE, Jack Welch. And what really strikes me about this particular quote, and it speaks to what Lisa, you were saying earlier this morning about the pace of change. So we've got this, the world is moving at this incredibly rapid rate. So we've got this pace of change happening outside in the world around us. And then inside of our organisations, we've got our own rate of change, and it's going at a certain pace. So when we think about the difference between the two, if the rate of change that's happening within our organisations is slower than the rate of change that's happening outside in the world, the end is definitely coming. It's just a question of when. So we know that it's really important. So how do you actually get better at it? And there's a lot of fluff out there in the innovation community, especially in Australia, around what innovation is, how to actually do it. And a lot of it's based on, oh, this worked really, really well over here, so we'll come in and we'll embed it and it'll work really, really well for us. But at Inventium, we like to stamp out that fluff, and we use a scientific approach to innovation. So there's a lot of research out there at some of the top research institutions across the world around what's scientifically proven to work, so in their fields of psychology and neuroscience. And I don't know, this must just make me the biggest geek in the world, because I think there's something really cool about being able to use science to get us closer to the truth. And I've personally been a bit of a science geek since I was a little kid, always loved inventing things and building things. And as Christina mentioned, I studied entrepreneurship, so wanting to look at, okay, we can make things better for people, live a better life, and have things that help us become better as a world. And so I studied entrepreneurship to see, okay, how can I increase the impact? And then working at Deloitte, all of the innovations that would release out to market, so managing a national ideas pipeline, seeing the impact that you can have on an organisation as large as that one, increased twofold. So then what happens when you go to a company like Inventium, where the impact that you can have on the innovation community is just enormous. So it's fantastic to be here today to tell you a couple of the things that we do, quite typically with clients. But again, it's all about a scientific approach for us. So what's actually been proven, and distilling those down into scientific methodologies and frameworks that we can pass on. So what I want to cover off today are a couple of tools, but I just want to quickly draw your attention. So these are some of the clients that we work with all across the world. But what's really important to me about this particular slide is there's a huge amount of diversity up there in terms of markets, in terms of industries, in terms of consumers. And what really strikes me about this is that no matter which industry you're in, no matter which market you're in, the drivers for innovation are the same. I think that's really important. So as you may or may not have picked up from the placards on the table, we are the research and methodology partner behind the BRW Most Innovative Companies list. So we assess all of the entrants every year on their innovativeness, and we've been doing that with BRW for quite a few years now. So it's exciting to see a couple of the stories from today around last year's list, which was really great. So the first thing I want to talk to you about. First tool, one of the biggest innovation killers out there is assumptions. So these could be cold hard facts like, okay, we have a budget of 100K to solve this problem. Or they could just be perceived assumptions like, oh, the board's never going to approve that type of idea. So these are just things that we assume to be true. And the problem with assumptions when it comes to creative thinking and innovation is they actually fence in our thinking. So each of those assumptions that we have around a particular problem or challenge, it comes up in our brain like a little fence, each of those assumptions, and it says to our brain, you can only explore ideas within this particular realm of possibilities. So what can be really powerful to do is to consciously identify those assumptions and crush them by asking, well, what if the opposite was true? So by asking what if the opposite was true, you're deliberately crushing those fences in your mind, and you're giving your ideas and thoughts permission to explore over here and over here and over here and all these other areas that you wouldn't have otherwise. So a really fundamental example of where an assumption has been crushed in an industry is, of course, the iPhone. So show of hands, who has an iPhone in the room? Whoa, okay. It's a decent market share. Good job, Apple. So a fundamental assumption that existed in the mobile phone industry about 10 years ago was that if you had a mobile phone, if you were manufacturing one, it had to have 12 buttons on it. Otherwise, how would you make a phone call? How could you send a text? So Apple actually asked, well, what if the mobile phone only had one button? What could that look like? And hence the iPhone, and it's pretty much fundamentally changed the interface of mobile phone technology as we know it today, and judging by the amount of hands that went up before, it's doing pretty well. But another example I want to give you around assumption crushing is Volvo. So another company that's done this really well, a really fundamental assumption that existed in the motor industry was that airbags exist on the inside of a car to protect the driver and any passengers in the event of a collision. Pretty fair assumption. But what they actually did was ask, okay, well, what if airbags existed outside of the car to protect other people? What ideas could spring from that? So what they actually ended up inventing is, it's actually amazing and life-saving, so very important. So what they've done is they've put an airbag on the outside of the car to protect a pedestrian in the event of a collision. So when a car hits a pedestrian, the main point of impact, most of the damage is done when the pedestrian slides up the bonnet and their head hits the windscreen. So the way this works is an airbag deploys from the bonnet and then slides up the windscreen and protects the head and reduces the amount of damage done. So another example of how just crushing a really fundamental assumption by asking what if the opposite was true has led to an incredible innovation. So crushing assumptions, how to actually do this back in your organisations out of today, it's actually really simple. There are just two things that I want you to do. The first thing is, of course, identify your assumptions. So these could be either negative or neutral assumptions. So a neutral assumption could be just describing the way that things are, like a mobile phone has 12 buttons. Or it could be a negative assumption, such as our customer experience is completely woeful. Just try to steer clear of those positive assumptions, because when you crush them in the opposite way, the ideas that lead from something negative isn't exactly always great. So you want to have negative or neutral assumptions to crush. Second step is crushing them. So you crush an assumption by asking, what if the opposite was true? Very, very simple, and forming that into a way that is a question, so something that you can answer with a solution, with an idea. So that is crushing assumptions. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, so the second tool I just want to cover off very quickly for you today, is all around the mindset that we put ourselves in when we're doing creative thinking and trying to come up with ideas. So quite naturally, when we approach a problem, we're approaching it from our own perspective, much like this rhino here. And so Quite naturally though, whenever we are approaching all these problems, because we're approaching it constantly from our own experience, our own perspective, our own set of values, we tend to come up with a similar type of idea, similar kind of solution. So what can be really powerful to do is to actually put ourselves in someone else's shoes and ask ourselves, how would they solve this particular problem? How would they look at this challenge? What kind of ideas would they bring to the table? So say, for example, if you're in an organisation and you're dealing with, like the example before, of just a woeful customer experience, like your customers are walking out the door, you're not having the impact that you want to as an organisation, you're not growing, you're shrinking, you've got a really tough problem and you're looking for some ideas to solve that. If you were to put yourself in the mindset of this gentleman, the Dalai Lama, so completely changing your mindset, what kind of ideas would the Dalai Lama have for your customer experience challenge? So if you just put yourself in that mindset, he would come up with completely different ideas for how to solve that problem. Another example, if you are looking at a problem, very common problem we see in a lot of organisations is those silo mentalities, so departments working in their own little ecosystem. So if you're dealing with a problem like that, what if you were to think about it from the perspective of Kickstarter? Does anyone in the room know Kickstarter? Yes, yeah, a few, awesome. So for those of you who don't know Kickstarter, it's essentially a crowdfunding platform. So leveraging the power of the crowd to get projects up off the ground. So if you were to think about that kind of problem like Kickstarter, you say, okay, if Kickstarter came into our organisation and looked at our silo problem, what kind of ideas would they have? And of course, if you're looking at your business model innovation, so what's actually going on in your processes inside of your organisation? What if you were to think like McDonald's? Okay, so a massive global organisation, when we think about how streamlined their process is when you're just getting like a Big Mac meal, it's insane. It's timed down to the second. So what kind of ideas would McDonald's have when they're coming into your organisation to solve that problem? So very, very simple. Oh, look at that. Clumsy thumbsy. So just putting yourself in someone else's shoes can be an incredibly powerful tool to get incredibly different innovations and ideas. So just those two tools that I've covered off. Can you remember the first one? Crush assumptions, yes, and for those who were here last year, you might remember it as crush assumptions, yes. And the second tool that we're talking about, something to do with shoes, yes, so putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So just three final things that I'd really love you to take away. I mean, I'm only given a very short amount of time to sort of pass on some learnings, and when we talk about the innovation and creativity tools and the end-to-end innovation process, there's an enormous amount to cover off. So the first thing I'd love you to do is myself and my fellow Inventiologists at Inventium, every week we write a blog on innovation and a particular part of the innovation process. Very easy to register for our mailing list, and that goes out every week. The second thing I'd really love you to do is we've heard from some incredible speakers, some of BRW innovation lists, like top entrants from last year. We've got some amazing takeaways. I know Paul's encouraged you to scribble things down, so you've probably hopefully all got at least one big takeaway. But I want you to tell someone else about that one big takeaway. So there's heaps of research out there that suggests that when we share something with someone else, we're much more likely to keep that in our long-term memory. So please just share one thing, the most powerful thing that you got out of today. And the final thing is to benchmark yourself. So as Christina mentioned earlier this morning, the BRW 2014 innovation list is now open for registration. So benchmark yourself against some of Australia's most innovative companies and see where you're really sitting. And one thing that we do for all of the entrants in the list is we give them an innovation audit report. So actually looking at where your organisation is sitting in what's a best practice approach to innovation. So that is the third and final thing. So I'll leave you with that for today. If you have any questions, you can always get me on Twitter or anywhere else. But enjoy the rest of your morning. Thank you for having me.